And let's go now to our morning panel of politicians. Labor MP and Parliamentary Secretary Jason Clare joins us from Sydney, and Liberal frontbencher Steve Ciobo from Brisbane. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Let's get into this migration debate first of all. Steve Ciobo, to you. Do you support a cut in overall migration numbers?
David, I think the main point is this, and that is that Australians want to ensure that as our population grows, that we retain amenity. We already know that a lot of infrastructure in our key cities, and I know firsthand, being from the Gold Coast, which is the fastest growing centre in Australia, that we've got real population pressures at the moment. So our point is simply to say to the government, it's one thing to have large numbers of migrants coming into the country, but it's another thing to make sure it's done in a sustainable way. At the moment, the infrastructure build is not keeping up with the population growth, and that's creating bottlenecks and causing problems. So until that infrastructure spend catches up, until this Labor government and state Labor governments get serious about meeting the demands, then we think that there should be a reduction in numbers until, as I said, that catch-up takes place. All
right, so how many should be cut and what types of migration should be cut?
David, I don't think that it's particularly about an exact number. It's a little bit like playing with a faulty hot shower. You need to tweak the knobs on a continual basis. What we need to do is make sure that we're getting enough people into the country that are skilled, and particularly have an emphasis on skilled migrants, so that we're meeting labour force demands from in the community. The second thing that we need to do...
skilled migration has to be quarantined, is that what you're saying?
And look, Scott Morrison has already indicated that we will retain a very strong emphasis on skilled migration. So that really should go to the core of a number of the concerns that were raised by Heather Ridout previously. So we are very focused on...
That leaves refugees and family reunion visas, or temporary workers that you're going to cut. So is that right? Is that where you would like to see the axe fall?
It's not about cutting numbers. It's about making sure that infrastructure investment and the livability of our cities matches the increase in numbers, David. This is the point. You've just
said, though, that it's about cutting numbers. You've said you've got to fiddle with the hot tap and cut numbers.
No, what I said was that we must make sure that we retain the amenity of our cities and our centres. Now, if we see a massive increase in infrastructure investment, then there would be no need to cut numbers, obviously.
Yes, and you said it, until we get to that point, we've got to cut numbers. Now, this is where it gets to the tricky part of the question. Who do you cut? Is it refugee visas, family reunions, or people on temporary work visas?
Well, we've put particular focus on retaining the number of skilled migrants. We think that there is scope to wind back, for example, family reunions. We think that there is scope to wind back some of the temporary visas that are issued, because they account for a very large number of the net migration intake. So from that perspective, they'd be two areas that the opposition spokesman has already nominated as areas that we would focus on.
All right, thank you for an answer on that. Jason Clare, to you, the current net overseas migration number is around $300,000 people for the last year.
Yep.
Are you happy to continue with that sort of annual figure?
Well, that includes roughly the same amount of permanent people who come to Australia now as happened under the Rudd government. Part of that figure accounts for people that are coming home, Australians that are coming home because they can't find a job overseas. I've got a friend of mine who recently came back from the UK because she couldn't find a job. And that figure also includes students. And this is an important part of this debate. What the opposition flagged last night is that they may want to cut the number of international students that come to Australia. We've got to be careful that we don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. This is one of our biggest export markets after resources. I think it accounts for about $17 billion and employs about 120,000 people here in Australia. We make a lot of money from international students coming and getting skills here in Australia. The opposition have flagged here that they might cut in this space.
Sure, if we keep going with 300,000 a year, though, we're going to go well beyond that 36 million number by 2050.
Well, as I said, one of the reasons for that number is because of the global recession. Australians came home from the UK, came home from the US, because the simple fact is unemployment in the UK and the US is up at 10%. It's a lot higher than it is in Australia.
So it will fall down naturally. It will fall naturally next year, is what you're saying?
Let me agree with one point that Steve made. I think it's about keeping the economy strong and amenity, making sure that the quality of life for Australians is good. The population will go up naturally because we're having babies and we're living longer. There's about 300,000 babies born every year and about 150,000 people pass away. So that's part of the population increase. Part of it's immigration, and you can alter or change the number of people who come to Australia under the program depending on our economic circumstances. So, as Heather mentioned, we cut the number of skilled migrants over the last 12 months, and that was because of the global recession, because there were fewer jobs here available in the current economic circumstances than there were before that. But another part, and Steve's aware of this because he lives in South East Queensland, is internal migration. We've got people coming from New South Wales and Victoria up to South East Queensland, putting more pressure on infrastructure up in Queensland. So all of these things, natural increases, immigration, and the movement of Australians from one part of the country to another, have to be factored into a population policy.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is less of that sunshine and beautiful beaches where you are, Steve, doing that internal migration. We're going to take a quick break, come back and talk about Malcolm Turnbull deciding to bow out of politics. Where does this leave the Liberal Party? Stay with us.